best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm an X-Men fan. Absolutely. I think overall, it's if we're talking about a full run of comics, it's probably my favorite kind of brand or part. If you compare it against things like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, X-Men is probably it for me. I think, despite I'm not a fan of the current era, and there's been one thing to kind of point out is it's easy to gloss over some of the mess of the past. When the Angel was revealed to have like mutant AIDS healing blood, and he took Sam Guthrie's sister and basically had sex with her up in the air above her mom. I mean, there's and Nightcrawler being the son of the devil. There's been some horrendous X-Men stories long before the current Krakoa era. I don't think, um, as I've done reviews on this channel, I thought that what Hickman did with House of X Powers of 10 was pretty powerful, was intriguing. So, I mean, it's not all bad. Some people presented it like the X-Men were perfect before it got to this point, and they definitely were not. The entire, decimation and the 190, was it 199 or 167, whatever, the mutants, there were just a little over 100 of them, and then they were being kept on a reservation by the Sentinel. Like there's been some dumb in there. Interestingly enough, I think that as a video for another time probably, but sometimes when Bendis comes in to do a big event like he did I think there's a story to be told about Bendis and his effects on the X-Men line, and how I think it could be argued that Bendis wrecked a lot more than he put together. House of M led to this one of the most miserable eras, in my mind, of the X-Men, with the whole depowered thing. And then when he came on and wrote the X-Men, the whole time-traveling X-Men into the future, I think also did a lot more harm than good as well. But regardless of all that, I am an X-Men fan. Some of you know, I've mentioned before, I own every copy of the X-Men. I have a complete run in good condition, and it's very fond to me. I have lots of very powerful, very good memories about this run. So, in the spirit of keeping it more positive, I've been asked at various times, hey, why don't tell us the comics you enjoyed the most? Tell us your favorite runs of things. So why not start with the comic that I love the most, the X-Men? What are my favorite moments of the X-Men? So I started thinking about it, and there's lots of kind of one-off stories, lots of moments that come to mind, from the ones that like everybody has, like during the Dark Phoenix saga when Wolverine was shoved into the sewer and then he comes back up. It's like you took your best shot, now it's my turn. It's an iconic panel. It's something that everybody remembers. To even more obscure things when the trial was going on for Magneto and X-Men 200, and Fenris attacked, and there was this whole dynamic of was there some manipulation during that trial? There's lots of little elements here and there. Even I know Joss Whedon's run is fairly polarizing in terms of what it does, but there's some moments in there that I definitely enjoyed. I enjoyed, and this is, I know I've talked about quipping and how frustrating it is in comics, but there were some setups to some jokes that Whedon did that were quite good. The whole Colossus and Break World, which the Break World storyline was probably the weakest point of his run in my mind. But the whole idea of like, well, the citizens of Break World believe you're going to destroy your planet, Colossus. I'm sure this comes as a surprise to you. And he kind of comes back with, no, it's always been my ambition to destroy this planet. And everybody looks at him funny. He's like, this is why I don't make jokes. And it played well in that moment. There's a lot of little things like that. But if we're talking about more than just moments, we're talking about stories. For me, the most kind of magical era of the X-Men is not the Dark Phoenix saga. It's not some of the earlier, John Byrne work. Days of Future Past, I think, is a good story. It's fine. I don't think it's aged as well as some of the other things. As I've gone back and I've read it, it's a perfectly good story, but maybe it's because they've gone to that well so much, it's lost a little bit of its punch. For me, leading up to probably X-Men 201 and that's the one where Storm defeated Cyclops to be leader of the X-Men. Storm was depowered at the time, so it was a completely uneven match. But the heart behind that was not that, hey, Storm is a Mary Sue who can do no wrong. It was that Cyclops's mind, Scott's mind, wasn't in it. He was, had the situation with Madeline Pryor, and he was still, he is going through a lot. And so it was more a passing of the torch. So starting from that issue, we roll into a few things. There's a few crossovers with Secret Wars 2, which were a little clunky. But we quickly get into the Mutant Massacre. And at that moment, from kind of the beginning of the Mutant Massacre, and the way that hit was out of nowhere. They did not have, and Claremont was fairly legendary, I think, for setting up storylines and then paying them off like 20, 30 issues later. There's a few little rumblings that the massacre was coming, but they introduced several new, quite powerful villains that basically came in and kicked the ass of the heroes. And that was it was a very powerful storyline, and it kicked off this whole moment where the X-Men's world got extremely dangerous. They went from the Mutant Massacre to Fall of the Mutants, where a number of additional things kind of fell apart for them. They did have their big hero moment at the end, but in classic X-Men fashion, not enough people recognized it, realized it. And then they went to Australia. And I know for some, the Australian arc was polarizing. I loved it. This entire run from kind of, again, X-Men 201 really kicked into gear with Mutant Massacre, went through Fall of the Mutants, went to the Australia storyline, introduced Genosha, introduced kind of the Reavers and kind of that brutality, the fall of Madeline Pryor that led into Inferno, and ultimately the walking through the Siege Perilous and losing kind of their identities. That arc of comics, which is about, I think I'm now going off memory, I think that's about 40 to 50 comics at least, because there's some double shipping in there. That was, to me, the best era of the X-Men. I think it introduced some pretty cool new villains. I think that we got some definite big time threats with certainly with Madeline Pryor and kind of that entire arc of everything that had gone into Scott Summers and how he left his wife, went to X Factor, and the issues with his brother Havoc. It created a super interesting dynamic between the two of them that really defined kind of their relationship for decades after. You had Mr. Sinister, you had the Marauders. You just, even the Adversary, which was not the most amazing villain during this time period, served a great purpose and helped tie up a lot of kind of mythology elements. What they did with Forge, it was powerful storytelling, and it was world building, because as you had the X-Men feared dead, kind of living out in Australia, trying to help the world as almost outlaws, you had Forge and Strong Guy and Moira, Banshee trying to kind of pick up some of the pieces on their end. I mean, hell, and it's crazy to think about. You had a team where Dazzler was a major part of the team, and it was an amazing team. This also had, I think, the Extinction Agenda was in there. There's a couple other events during this time period, but it was this was the X-Men firing on all cylinders for me. And you definitely had some bigger stories that happened in other places. Like I mentioned, Dark Phoenix Saga, everybody goes to that. It's a good story, no doubt about it. But if you compare it to what was a pretty amazing, 5-year run plus of the X-Men books, that was an amazing era. You also had some pretty incredible artists. I mean, you had John Romita Jr. in there doing some of the best work of his career. You had Mark Silvestri doing pretty amazing stuff. Alan Davis would drop in, Art Adams. I mean, Rick Leonardi did some stories during that time period. That was just a period where you had great artists, really cool characterization. Longshot was on the team, Dazzler, Psylocke. You had Storm, of course. Wolverine was there. Rogue, Havoc. It was a very, very solid, good group, and just it's funny because they always identify these major moments for the X-Men, and they talk about Giant Size, and then they talk about what Grant Morrison did, and then now what Jonathan Hickman did. But if you look at kind of the Mutant Massacre, you took an established team that they had built up for a while. You completely turned it on its ear. You had Magneto in there kind of as a good guy at the time, Kitty, Colossus, Nightcrawler, all removed from the team very abruptly. And you had the team, dead in the eyes of the world, having to recommit. I mean, that was a major shift in the comic, and it gets somewhat glossed over. So for me, dollar for dollar, that is by far my favorite era of the X-Men. And if you haven't read that I certainly encourage it. Go back because it will help with some of the context. Read certainly starting from issue 201, but I think even if you go a little further back to kind of Life Death 1, where Storm loses her powers, I think that might be a better place to begin, and then just read it through. And ultimately, to me, where it falls apart from a story perspective is actually as Jim Lee started coming onto the comic, and the art was brilliant from Jim Lee. But when you had Baby Storm and the introduction of Gambit and some of these other kind of X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, for a lot of people that's also a great era of X-Men, and it was. There were some great stories in there, but I think that there is a certain power to the entire era where you get to kind of an ending with them walking into the siege and erasing their lives in Australia, and kind of how all that went and some of the manipulation that was going on at the time. That was, to me, that was powerful. I guess right after that he had the Extinction Agenda. That was good as well. But that, to me, that's the place to be for the X-Men. So I'm curious for you, what are your favorite eras of these comics of the X-Men? What is it that you like? What are your favorite stories? Why does the Australia arc get crapped on so much? A number of people just will continuously say that moment in the comics history was a lousy moment, and it was easily forgettable. To me, the opposite. Introduced Jubilee during that time period, crucified Wolverine. I mean, there are just some amazing moments during that series. But that's my favorite bit. I'm going to do this from time to time, just with more comics, kind of the parts that matter to me, and I'd love to hear the parts that matter to you. So X-Men, what are the big runs that really stand out in your mind? What do you love? Where to begin? Interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.